She walked into that wedding hall alone, uninvited by half the room and ignored by everyone, until the richest man in the room stood up and silenced 300 people. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in a room where you had every right to exist, stay with me because this story is for you. And before we go any further, if you love stories about dignity, karma, and moments that give you chills, hit that like button right now and subscribe because this one will stay with you long after it ends. My name is Adaise Okonkwo. I am a 34-year-old structural engineer from Lagos, Nigeria, raised partly in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have spent my entire career building things that are meant to hold weight: bridges, port warehouses, load-bearing walls designed to withstand pressure that most people never even think about. I am good at what I do. I have always been good at what I do, but none of that mattered the night I walked into the Grand Seoul Majestic Hotel in the heart of Seoul, South Korea, wearing a deep burgundy gown, my hair pinned up in a crown of twists, and my invitation, a personal handwritten one, tucked inside my clutch. None of my credentials mattered. None of my work mattered. The only thing that seemed to matter to the people in that room was that I was a Black woman standing alone in a space that had clearly never considered making room for someone like me. I want to tell you this story from the beginning because the beginning mattered, and because the ending, I promise you, is something you will not see coming. Jinwoo Park and I met 3 years before his wedding. He was not yet the figure the newspapers called him, the quiet titan of Korea's second largest shipping and logistics dynasty. When I met him, he was simply a man under enormous pressure, standing in a hard hat on the edge of a construction site in Lagos, trying very hard not to show how frightened he was. I was the engineer his company had contracted to assess the structural integrity of their new port warehouse facility. It was a massive project. Billions of dollars of cargo were meant to pass through that building every year. We did not become close friends immediately. That kind of trust builds slowly. But after everything that happened in Lagos, and I will get to that, Jinwoo and I developed a bond that neither of us ever fully put into words. He was one of the most decent people I had ever worked alongside. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who noticed things other people walk past. When he called me 8 months before his wedding and told me he was getting married, I laughed and congratulated him. When he told me he wanted me there, not as a professional contact, but as a friend, I said yes without hesitation. I should have asked more questions, but I trusted him, and I still do. That part never changed. The night of the wedding, I arrived at the hotel 30 minutes before the ceremony. The ballroom was extraordinary. Gold fabric draped from ceiling beams, white peonies and orchids on every surface, crystal chandeliers throwing soft light across 300 people dressed in a way that made it clear money was not a concern in this family. I stood at the entrance for a moment and took it all in. I felt the first few stares almost immediately. Not everyone, but enough. The wedding coordinator, a sharp-faced woman in a navy suit, approached me with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She asked for my name. I gave it. She ran her finger down her list twice, frowned, and told me my seat did not appear to be confirmed. I showed her the handwritten invitation. She looked at it the way someone looks at something they've already decided not to believe. She told me to wait by the entrance while she sorted it out. I waited for 11 minutes. I counted. Eventually, a junior staff member, a young woman who kept her eyes down and apologized twice more than she needed to, led me to a table at the very back of the room, not near the back. I could barely see the altar from where I sat. I was placed beside an arrangement of unused chairs in a floral display that was clearly there to fill space, not to accommodate a guest. I sat down, straightened my back, rested my hands in my lap, and decided right then and there that I would not give a single person in that room the satisfaction of watching me shrink. That lasted about 40 minutes. During the cocktail hour, while guests mingled and champagne moved through the room on silver trays, I stood near the edge of the crowd, close enough to feel part of the evening, far enough that no one felt the need to speak to me. A bridesmaid, one of Soo-yeon's friends, a woman I later learned was named Hana, brushed past me in a way that felt deliberate. A full glass of sparkling water tipped against my arm and cascaded went down the side of my gown. She looked at me. I looked at her. She smiled, not apologetically, and walked away. I excused myself to the restroom. I stood at that marble sink for a long moment. I gripped the edge of the counter. I looked at myself in the mirror. The gown, the hair, the face I had put carefully together that morning with the intention of honoring my friend's wedding, and I felt something that I don't often let myself feel in professional spaces. I felt the full, humiliating weight of being unwanted in a room I had every right to be in. I breathed in slowly. I breathed out, and I said to myself quietly, so only the mirror could hear, you belong here. Jinwoo asked you, don't you dare leave. I went back out, and then Madame Suki found me. Jinwoo's mother was the kind of woman who entered a room and expected it to rearrange itself around her. She was elegant in the way that old, untouchable wealth tends to produce pearl, silk, posture like a blade. She walked toward me with deliberate calm, and the small cluster of guests nearby seemed to sense something was happening and went quiet. She looked at me for a moment without speaking, as if she was giving me a chance to apologize for existing. Then she said in perfect, clipped English, chosen I understood, so that I would not miss a single word. This is a family gathering. I don't know who told you that you were welcome here, but some spaces are not meant for everyone. Nobody said anything. A few people looked at the floor. A few others looked at me, waiting to see what I would do. I kept my voice completely even. Mr. Jinwoo invited me personally, madam. I am here to honor him. She held my gaze for 2 more seconds, long enough to make sure I understood she was not finished with this conversation, only pausing it. And then she turned and walked back into the crowd. The guests around us dissolved back into their own conversations as if nothing had happened, as if I had imagined it, as if the most humiliating moment of my adult life had simply evaporated into the floral scented air of that beautiful, cruel room. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest surface. My hands were trembling, not from fear, from the enormous effort of holding myself together when every instinct in my body was telling me to walk out of those double doors and never look back. It was in that exact moment that an old man sat down beside me. He appeared without announcement, lowering himself into the chair next to mine with the careful deliberateness of a man in his late 70s who has long since stopped rushing anywhere. He was small, slightly hunched, dressed in a beautifully cut dark suit with a single white boutonniere. He had warm, sharp eyes and the kind of face that had clearly been handsome once and had aged into something better, something that looked like wisdom earned the hard way. He introduced himself simply. Chairman Dae-jung Park, Jinwoo's grandfather, the man who had built the shipping empire from nothing 5 decades ago, starting with a single cargo vessel and a debt he spent 15 years repaying. He didn't comment on what had just happened with Madame Suki. He simply looked at me steadily and said, my grandson told me about you. He said you are the woman who saved his company and possibly his life. I stared at him. And then the story I had kept locked behind a professional non-disclosure agreement for 2 years came rushing back to me all at once. It was a Tuesday morning in Lagos. I had been on the Park Group warehouse project for 6 weeks, running standard structural assessments when I found something that made my stomach drop. Deep within the load-bearing framework of the Eastern Wing, a section that had already passed 2 prior inspections, I discovered a catastrophic miscalculation in the foundational reinforcement. The kind of error that doesn't announce itself, the kind that waits. The building was already partially operational. 47 workers were inside on the morning shift. I called the site manager. He told me to write up a report and he would escalate it to head office in Seoul. I told him there was no time for a report. He told me I was overreacting. I walked onto that floor myself and told every single worker to evacuate. Some of them looked at me like I had lost my mind. I didn't care. I kept walking and I kept talking until the floor was clear. 38 hours later, after I had stayed on that site through the night, after Jinwoo had flown in personally, after a team of engineers I had contacted through my own network had confirmed everything I found, the eastern wall was condemned. The reinforcement failure was verified. If the building had remained operational for another 72 hours under normal cargo cargo load. Structural engineers estimated a partial collapse was near certain. 47 people went home to their families that week because of a calculation I refused to ignore and an evacuation I refused to delay. I signed the NDA because Jinwoo's legal team asked me to protect the company during the investigation period. I took my fee, which was fair. I went home. I told nobody. I moved on to the next project. I had never spoken about it publicly, not once. Chairman Dae-jung watched my face while I processed the fact that he knew all of it. Then he said something that cracked something open inside me. He has never forgotten. Neither have I. I did not have time to respond because the reception had begun to move into the main hall and the best man was already adjusting his tie at the microphone. I followed Chairman Dae-jung inside and we sat together at the back of the room and the toast began. The best man's speech was warm and funny and clearly rehearsed. And then Madam Suk-hee did something unexpected. She took the microphone. It was unusual. The groom's mother stepping up to speak at a Korean wedding reception in that way, and the room still with a kind of uncomfortable curiosity. She was composed, beautifully spoken. Every sentence was draped in the language of family legacy, cultural pride, and heritage. She spoke about the importance of a partner who understands the weight of carrying a great name. She spoke about lineage, about belonging, about the right kind of woman standing beside a man of status. And then she looked at me just once, a single brief glance, so fast that half the room probably missed it, delivered alongside the line. Some people attend weddings as guests. Others belong in them. Soft laughter rippled through the family side of the room. Chairman Dae-jung's hand closed over mine on the armrest between us. He didn't look at me. He just said very quietly, patience. And then Jin-woo stood up. The room expected a groom's toast. Brief, gracious, traditional. He picked up his glass, and for a moment it looked like exactly that. And then he set the glass back down. He unbuttoned his jacket slowly. He looked around the room, all 300 people, every table, every face. And then he looked to the back, directly at me. He began to speak in Korean, then switched to English, back and forth, so that not a single person in that room, regardless of language, could claim they hadn't understood. He thanked his family. He thanked Soo-yeon. He thanked his grandfather. And then he stopped. He took a breath and he said, "There is a woman sitting at the back of this room who most of you ignored tonight. Some of you insulted her. Some of you made her feel as though she did not belong here. I need every person in this room to understand something before this night goes any further. She is the reason there is a wedding tonight. She is the reason I am alive." 300 people, complete silence. You could hear the chandeliers humming. He told the whole story. The Lagos site, the calculation, the evacuation, the 38 hours, the 47 workers. He told it without drama, without performance, just plainly the way you describe something true. And at the end, he said, "Her name is Adaez Okonkwo, and I am asking every person in this room to stand and acknowledge the woman who was seated at the back like she didn't matter, when she is, in fact, the reason this family still has something worth celebrating." Nobody moved for 3 full seconds. Then Chairman Dae-jung stood slowly with his cane but fully upright, and then the table nearest to us, and then the next and the next, like something rolling through the room that nobody had the courage or the desire to stop. 300 people rising to their feet in that golden chandelier lit ballroom, applauding, some of them looking directly at me, some of them looking at the floor, understanding what that moment said about how they had behaved an hour earlier. I sat very still. I did not cry. I was not going to cry. I simply stood because it felt wrong to remain seated, and I let the moment be exactly what it was. Hannah, the bridesmaid, was standing at her table with her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. She did not look up once. Madam Suk-hee was the last person in the room to rise. She stood stiffly, her face unreadable, her pearls perfectly in place. But she stood. What I did not expect was Soo-yeon. After the applause faded and the room settled back into the careful hum of a reception trying to find its footing again, the bride, in her full gown, her hair pinned with delicate gold pieces, her hands folded, walked the entire length of that hall. She came to my table. She sat down in the empty chair beside me as if she had always planned to be there. She leaned close and said quietly, "I knew about you before tonight. Jinwoo told me everything when he proposed. He told me he could not build a future with any person who was not able to respect the people who truly mattered to him. I said, I understood. That is why I am here, and that is why I am glad you stayed. I looked at her. This woman I had half assumed was simply a product of family arrangement. This woman I had not given enough credit to. She looked back at me with clear, steady eyes, and in that moment I understood the enemy that evening had never been Su Young. It had been something older and colder than any one person in that room. It had been the architecture of a world that decides without evidence, without conversation, without a single moment of honest attention, who belongs and who does not. I finally let myself cry. One tear, just the one. She pretended not to notice, which was the kindest thing she could have done. 3 weeks after the wedding, a sealed envelope arrived at my office. The handwriting on the front was careful and old-fashioned. Inside was a single page written by hand in ink. It was from Madame Sookhe. She did not open with an apology. She opened with honesty, which I respected more. She wrote, I will not ask for your forgiveness tonight. I do not deserve it tonight, but I want you to know I saw you. I saw you long before my son pointed you out, and I was afraid of you, not because of who you are, but because of what you showed me about who I am. That was all. No grand gesture, no Hollywood resolution, just a crack in a door that had been sealed shut for a very long time, and the faint, uncertain light of something that might, in time, become better than what it was. I folded the letter. I placed it in my desk drawer. I did not respond. Not yet. Some doors don't need to be forced. Some just need time to open the right way. Chairman Dae-jung flew to Lagos the following year. He visited the port facility, the rebuilt one, reinforced correctly, standing exactly as it should. He asked to meet the workers from the original crew, every single one who was still on staff. He shook each hand himself. He spent 4 hours on that floor. My engineering firm signed its largest international contract in history, a port development project spanning 3 nations on the African continent, backed in full by the Park Group. Jin Woo and Su Yeon became 2 of our most vocal advocates, quietly opening doors in industries I had spent years knocking on from the outside. And Hana sent me a dry cleaning invoice for the water, along with a handwritten note that said simply, I'm sorry, I'm working on being better. I paid the invoice myself without comment, then donated the exact same amount to a scholarship fund for African women pursuing careers in structural engineering. It felt like the right kind of math. I did not go to that wedding to prove anything. I went because a friend asked me to be there, and I believed that was reason enough. But the universe, it turns out, had its own plans for that evening, and what I walked away with was something no credential, no contract, no project ever gave me. I walked away knowing in the most unshakable way that dignity, when you protect it quietly, when you refuse to let anyone pull it out of your hands in a crowded room, has a way of standing up for itself, usually when you least expect it, always at exactly the right moment. She didn't leave, she stayed, and the room never forgot it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that your presence is never too much in any room you were invited into, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been the only one in the room? Have you ever stayed when everything in you said leave? Tell me your story. I read every single one, every time.